I haven't really talked about indirect approaches at all. So far, I've always assumed the direct approach. But in the beginning, I actually started by approaching girls indirectly. I would ask for directions to places like the supermarket or the pet shop. The idea is to not convey interest right from the beginning because the girl might then judge you only based on what she has seen of you so far. And that is just your appearance. That's not necessarily a problem if you're decent looking, but even if you are, there was no chance for you to show her what your character is like yet. Even if you are decent looking, so what? She might get approached by decent looking guys like you a lot, especially at night. How are you different? By approaching a girl indirectly, you give yourself some time to show off your character before she realizes you are interested in her. Therefore, you are postponing the moment she is making a decision about whether she wants to see and hear more of you or not. There are certainly advantages and disadvantages to both direct and indirect approaches. Indirect approaches allow you to approach girls in situations that maybe otherwise you would have had to pass on entirely, like high-pressure situations with other people present in a very confined space, or girls that are busy doing things like shop assistants who could easily dismiss you since they have things to do. They also allow you to not appear like you are hitting on girls. That can be of advantage if the environment you're in doesn't allow for that kind of thing, where maybe shop assistants would swoop in because they think you are bothering the customers. Or you don't want the girl to think that you're too into her too early. Direct approaches have certain advantages too, though. Just the act of approaching a girl directly generates attraction with the girl and makes you stand out. She might be used to guys hitting on her in nightclubs, but has it ever happened during the daytime? It has happened tons of times that girls, especially beautiful girls, told me that this never happened to them before. Even girls in the gym. You'd think they would get hit on all the time, but it doesn't necessarily happen a lot to every girl. Doing this during the day is still perceived as unusual and inappropriate by a lot of people. Guys feel self-conscious about themselves, so they'd rather not take the risk of public humiliation and other negative consequences. And pretty women can be especially intimidating. The result is, a lot of pretty women never get hit on by decent guys during the day. That makes her encounter with you special to her. She knows that a lot of guys are too afraid to do this sort of thing, so she will give you extra points for courage. This directly increases her attraction to you. What they maybe don't know is that there is a high chance that direct approaches are received very well. Often girls are actually extremely nice. In most cases, they will at least stay polite. The most impolite reaction you will experience will be girls asking you what you want from them, and maybe acting impatiently. So there isn't really any risk to approaching. You'll appear courageous, but you'll get to a point where it becomes so easy to do, you won't perceive it as requiring courage, at least not a lot. Doing this often will also desensitize you to it. So the dirty little secret is, you take no risk, you will be received warmly by most women, and you'll appear more attractive to her by virtue of being a risk taker. And those girls that don't receive you warmly, you'll be able to move on from very quickly. You'll desensitize to that as well, and often it will be funny more so than embarrassing. In addition to this, direct approaches also are more flirty right from the start. It's hard to transition from asking for directions to doing heavy flirting. There is a way to approach indirectly and flirt with your body language, and that's something every man should try, but asking for directions is going to make it hard to get flirty. In indirect approaches, you will have to appear as if you're really just asking about something, like directions, act confused, and then look for a way to transition to talking about more personal things. Not every girl will be up for it. Not every girl will even have time to stop and help you with your question. And the girls might realize at some point that you were really only interested in hitting on them, and they will think you were too afraid to be direct about it. When I first started approaching, I did indirect approaches for the first half year. My very first approach was direct, but I quickly transitioned to doing indirect approaches. In the beginning, it felt amazing to find out that I could do something like this, but making a habit out of it and telling myself to at least do one approach every day, it quickly felt as if indirect was just not good enough anymore. It felt as if it didn't take any courage at all anymore. You can always just pretend you really just wanted to ask for directions. Your ego is not on the line. It doesn't feel like you are getting rejected. In fact, she often doesn't have a chance to reject you when you don't make it clear what you want from her. Telling her what you want from her will filter out the girls that really have no interest. After that first half year of doing indirect approaches, sometimes 5 to 10 a day, that often led nowhere because the girls were busy, I wanted to get into direct game. In the beginning, it was hard. I did some and they were received well. Some were received not so well. I was very clunky. But after the first 10, I was slowly getting into it. Doing some approaches at a university finally sold me on the idea of switching to direct completely. Before that, I was only testing it out, often switching back to indirect as my default, but on that day, I was received so warmly by a lot of girls that I felt I could do it. That's been a couple of years ago. Looking back, it feels strange to know that it was hard for me to do at some point. For me, direct has become the default, but indirect has its merits too. Ideally, both should be used depending on the situation that you're in. I rarely use it because now it kind of feels like a cop-out to me, but I definitely think there are situations where it's absolutely a good choice. The very first number I got and the very first date I had both came from indirect approaches. The first date I got from a supermarket asking if the ice cream she was about to buy was any good. That is a good opener to use in any kind of situation. No matter what she's doing, no matter what she's holding, ask her, "Excuse me, is that any good?" If she's holding an item at the supermarket, ask her, "Is this any good? I was thinking about buying the same." Follow that up with some rambling about the product she's holding. If she was holding ice cream, talk about what kind of ice cream you usually buy. Tell her, "Sometimes I like to buy one of those big 1 liter containers, let it melt, and then just drink it like a milkshake." Some interesting conversations can develop out of these kinds of approaches. Be creative and just talk. Make elderly conversation about mundane things. Check for interest, then transition to more personal conversation. If she's picking up fruit, ask her if they are any good. Tell her you never know how to tell the good fruit apart from the bad fruit. Tell her you think they're hiding the good fruit in the back for the privileged customers. One time, I asked the girl at the supermarket if the cucumbers she was about to buy were any good, and she said, "I don't know." A couple of weeks later, I used the same opener on the same girl in the exact same supermarket, same spot, again about to pick up cucumbers, and she said, "You've already asked me this. I don't know." If she's standing at a bus stop or sitting on the train fiddling with her phone, ask her if it's any good. Tell her you were thinking about buying a new phone because your old phone sucks. If she asks why, that's an indicator she's open to more conversation. Ask her if she thinks Samsung or Apple is better. Tell her about the one time you bought a cheap one from Amazon and it almost melted. Tell her you think it's ridiculous you need a special Apple-approved charger for iPhones. Tell her it's all just a money-making scheme. Tell her you hate smartphones, but feel like you have to use one, which makes you hate them even more. Tell her how you don't want to carry an expensive phone around with you because it could break or get stolen, but you need it for WhatsApp. It's essentially a 200-euro WhatsApp machine. These are just some examples of what I really think about these things. Use them if you want, or just convey your own thoughts on these subjects. Subways and trains are probably a good environment to use them in, since they are pretty packed, so you might get a lot of attention, and it's better to come in under the radar. In night approaches, it should even be the default, since girls are more used to getting hit on there, and it's more important to not convey too much interest too soon. You can't ask for directions in a nightclub, but there are tons of indirect things you can say to start a conversation. Instead of telling a girl that she looks nice, you can get right to making a comment about her. Guessing where she comes from tends to always work well in club environments. Or if you've made some observation about her, go directly into that as if you've just noticed that and you had to tell her without making it obvious you like her. If you want to open by asking her questions, you can ask her how long the club stays open or if she knows some other places nearby that are good. Direct and indirect approaches both have their merits, based on what kind of situation you are in. Girls are very receptive to direct approaches during the day because it happens so rarely, especially from someone with manners. But during the night, they are more used to guys hitting on them. Indirect is a better choice there, but direct can work too. I would never be super direct. "You look nice" is always as far as I go in terms of compliments. Indirect can also be a good way of getting into game. as you don't need to start by doing something that scares a lot of men. Everybody can muster up the courage to ask for help and then try to make basic conversation. But you will probably want to transition to trying out direct approaches at some point, since you get used to indirect approaches and they won't seem like that big of a deal anymore. For more tips on how to flirt with women properly, check out other videos on my channel. Please subscribe, hit the bell, and consider making a small donation via PayPal or subscribing to my Patreon. Links are in the description. Share and like this on social media. It helps me immensely. Check out this playlist for other videos like this. Thanks for watching. See you again. Bye bye.